Well, Chad, I will stop sharing screen here, and we are able to go ahead, so we can stay on track. Hand it over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Are you able to send the agenda? I see what you sent with the operating procedures, grant guidelines, and all of that, but I don't see today's agenda.
I will put it in the chat. Yes, I will send it out again right now. And I will just flash it up here just so we have it.
Yeah. Great. And then if you could follow up sending that around, that'd be helpful.
Of course.
All right. Get us started here. All right, welcome everybody. Got our regular Private Forest Accord Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting opening today, Tuesday, October 8th. We'll begin with call to order. And Andy, if you'd like to lead us through roll call.
Yep. Just a quick second here. All right, everyone. Please respond in the affirmative if you're present after I call your name. Chad Washington.
Here.
Bob Salinger. Scott Lightjack.
Here.
Courtney Griesel. Courtney, please correct me on your last name.
Yeah, it's not fancy. It's Griesel.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm here.
Thank you. Fran Cafarata.
Here.
Andrew Perkey.
Here.
Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Rembremer.
Here.
Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Kate Wells.
Here.
Chris Allen. Sarah Gregory. I'm gonna do Bob Salinger one last time. Doesn't look like he's here, but we do have quorum today, and we're able to still move forward, Chad. So back to you.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Now we will move to approve the agenda. I'm still not seeing it in my inbox, Andy. So if others have not seen it, then I guess we can approve it based on what's shared with us here.
Yeah, I have to stop sharing and close it to send the file. I don't know why that's happening. So once we approve this agenda on screen, I'll redistribute it. I'll stop sharing.
All right. So if there's any comments on the agenda, otherwise we will approve it as is. All right. Looks like you can go ahead and pull that down, Andy, and please distribute that. Apologies for not catching that earlier.
No worries. It might have just went to a different one of the many emails sent out. All right. It should be getting distributed now. We have public comment next in the meantime, Chad, on the agenda.
And did we have any public comment, Andy?
We had no written public testimony at this time. It's an opportunity for anyone on the call to feel free to raise their hand, and we're happy to allow public comment. All right, Chad. Well, I don't see any hands coming up digitally, so it doesn't look like we have any public comment for today. I'll hand it back to you with the new member introduction.
Great. Yeah, Andy, I'm still not seeing this thing come through, man. So if you could put that back up, that'd be helpful.
Of course.
Great. All right. So now we've got our new member introduction, and I'd like to welcome two new members to the MAC. Fran, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think the reason you're not seeing the agenda come through is that, Andy, you don't have Chad's email right on here. I'll forward it to him, but you need to update it to Chad at OFIC.
Thank you. I will look into that. I appreciate that, Fran.
Yep,
That would
no
make
worries.
sense.
I'll forward it right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Fran. Okay, so we will continue with welcoming our new committee members and give them a moment to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Courtney. Courtney, take a minute, say hi.
Hi, my name is Courtney Greasel. So I work with Sierra Pacific Industries. We're a family-owned wood products company. We own timberlands, a little over 180,000 acres here in Oregon, but also in Washington and California. And then we have sawmills in Oregon, Washington, and California as well. So I have the privilege of representing the company over our Oregon landscape and in those communities. Um, I'm honored to be part of this committee, and I appreciate it because you all are pretty intense subject matter experts in the categories of habitats and science and things that uh, I find very impressive and important. And so I look forward to engaging. My background is actually really in economics and in economic development and community development, and looking at landscapes from the standpoint of where people live, the environments around them, and how they can sustain in that setting for generations to come. And so I look forward to doing a lot of learning. And I will say that I have spent a lot of time, more time than my husband and son have cared to hear, listening to YouTube videos of your meetings and the level of deep dive work you've done to kind of start up a program. Startup is always the hardest phase of any organization. And so I'm relieved to have the privilege of coming in post startup. Um, I recognize that I didn't have to carry all that water, pun intended. And so I'm just really appreciative for the opportunity and for the grace that you all will give when I sometimes ask questions that may seem silly, but as part of just kind of learning your thought process as we got here. And so I'm open to any questions, but I'll get out of the way and let my counterpart in being new jump in and introduce themselves.
Thanks, Courtney. We'll have questions for both new committee members after Scott has a chance to introduce himself. So welcome, Scott. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Scott Lightcap. I was really pleased to get the nod to join your committee. And Courtney, you said it very well. There's a lot of pretty heavy hitters here that do some important work. So I'm pleased to be a part of that. As far as my background, I grew up on the south coast of Oregon at the mouth of the Rogue River in Gold Beach. And my family, diverse, bounced around to a few different things, commercial fishing, logging. My mom was a county health nurse. And then we managed a ranch for most of my young life. And so have strong ties to land management and the people that do it. So when this opportunity came available, it seemed like a really natural fit for me. From a career standpoint, I'm recently retired. I was a fisheries biologist with the BLM, and prior to that with the Forest Service, I think all told 33 or 34 years. And I've been retired for just about 2 years now, and realizing that it's fun. I like having the freedom and scheduling on my terms, but you can't go from such a purpose-driven life to a life of just having fun. And I needed to get some purpose and some meaning back in. So this is my attempt to re-engage and hopefully work and get to know all you guys and have fun and do some important work for the state. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Scott. It's nice to meet you. And do we have any questions from committee members or others for either Scott or Courtney? Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi, greetings, Courtney and Scott. It's a pleasure to meet both of you, and both of you did very well in your introductions. Very impressive. I'm curious, where do each of you live in Oregon? Where's home today?
Courtney, you want to go first?
I can't. I think you hinted at it. So, and I did a little bit because it's blue sky in the valley, but I'm in the South Valley, so Lane County. I live in Eugene proper. I will say that my heart is a little bit attached to Springfield because I was a public servant for that community for almost 20 years, and so I have a little bit of a bias towards a slightly smaller community, but I live in Eugene and my kiddo's in the school district here. So I've been here about 20 years.
Great.
Okay. And for me, my family has been in Roseburg, Douglas County area for the last 20 plus years. And so most of my life, most of my career has been in Southwest Oregon. So like Courtney, I'm a little partial to smaller towns, more rural, but love going to the cities too. So no offense to those of you who live in a city.
All right. Thank you both.
Any other questions from the committee for our new committee members?
Chad, does it make sense for each of us just to give a brief introduction so they know who we are? Have we already gotten information on us to them, Andy?
That seems only fair, Andrew. And since you are offering that, you can go ahead and lead the discussion here.
Okay, Andrew Perky. I'm actually in Eugene right now, Courtney, because I'm from Eugene originally. I went to South Eugene High School and University of Oregon. My mom is across the room here from me. I'm visiting with her at Cascade Manor in South Eugene. I live in Portland, and my career has been in in-stream flow and water rights for the last 30 years. I was the first executive director of the Oregon Water Trust, and then worked for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for 16 years, and am now a consultant working across the West, primarily on water resource management issues, but also the interface of watershed health and in-stream flow. And so certainly the projects that we're supporting with this funding source pertain to that. How do you improve, the hydrology of systems in Oregon? Even though I live in Portland, I still kind of consider Eugene and Southwest Oregon my heart homelands. I love being here. So Scott loved the South Coast as well. And yeah, my wife and I have 3 kids. The youngest one is a senior in college here in Eugene. So looking at retirement on the near horizon, Scott, but not quite as close as you appear to be, which is there.
I recommend it. You get to wear Hawaiian shirts whenever you want.
I like the Hawaiian shirt. I took note of it for sure. That's me.
That's great. Mark Stern, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, sir. Well, let's see, my professional career was with the Nature Conservancy in Oregon for the last 30 plus years. I'm retired now, but I had several runs with them. One was initially kind of focusing on my background and interest in wildlife biology and birds, was involved in that kind of work, mostly in Eastern Oregon and South Central Oregon. And then had a second run working mostly in the Klamath Basin, which was water rights, fisheries, tribes, farmers, ranchers, enviros, and the whole caboodle there, so to speak, which was a real interesting time, working on some big restoration projects with all the state and federal partners involved as well. And then the last 10 or so years was involved with forest management, particularly east side dry forests and wildfire related issues. So that was kind of the gambit there, and currently live in Portland. My wife and I spend a lot of time outside in Central Oregon as well as the coast, tracking birds and other things. And really glad to be part of this group, and really glad to see Scott and Courtney join the group. So thank you guys for being here today.
I will attest to Mark's statement too. I was at Black Butte this summer with friends, and I came upon he and his wife bird watching in the wetlands of Black Butte Ranch. So he's not pretending.
Very good. Fran, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, happy to do it. Fran Caffaretta, I'm out of Scappoose. So everyone with the nod to small towns, that's a small town, and we don't claim Portland, but we like being close to it. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I run a small wildlife consulting company here. Our focus is really, we work with the timber industry, strongly advocating for wildlife and keeping common species common. So working on a habitat-based approach for the intentional management of wildlife. And then my role here is the voice for the small woodland owners. So my family, we are small woodland owners in Oregon. We have about 400 acres in several counties: Lane, Yamhill, Benton, and Lynn. We kind of spread it out. My dad's really risk adverse, so we are terrified about wildfire in our family and have our properties spread out to try and mitigate that risk. So yeah, happy to be part of this group, and it's really nice to see some new faces. So welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. I guess that leaves myself as a voting committee member, and then we'll introduce the ex officio members. My name is Chad Washington, and I began, stewardship and community engagement coordinator with my prior employer, working on the North Coast, and was on the board of watershed councils up there. I've also been a member of the Northwest Community Forest Executive Committee, working on community-based forestry. And then for my prior employer, I also was the North American Manager of Sustainability for the timberland portfolio. My current role, I work for Oregon Forest Industries Council as Director of Forest Protection, focused on wildfire issues as well as forest health. So I was from the North Coast from the last 4 or 5 years. As of this weekend, I have moved to Dallas, Oregon, a little bit smaller community as well, working out of Salem. So with that, we will move on to the ex officio members. And I'll start with Mark Grenbemmer. And then Mark, if you want to just kick it to the next ex officio, we'll work through it that way.
There you go. You've almost made it like a test. So hi, Scott. Hi, Courtney. Welcome. I'm Mark Grenbemmer. I'm the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board regional program rep in Southwest Oregon. So Scott and I have crossed paths a few times, and it's really great to have you as part of the group, and likewise you too, Courtney. So I'm located in Medford. I live in suburbia, so you'll hear my dogs in the background. They switched garbage day, so the garbage trucks are running, so they're doing their job of alerting me and anybody else that'll listen that the garbage trucks are sneaking up on us. So apologize for that in advance. So I've been with OWEB since the beginning, which the beginning was in 1999 when OWEB became an agency. And before that, I worked for GWEB in the Oregon Watershed Health Program. So I've been around the Southwest quite a bit, and have had the privilege of working with a lot of great folks and a lot of great restoration projects throughout the years. So happy to be part of this group and happy to welcome you both on. And how about I run it over to Jennifer?
Hey there, Scott and Courtney, welcome. So I'm Jennifer Weichel. I'm the Oregon Department of Forestry's representative on the committee. And normally I'm the wildlife biologist for our Forest Resources Division, but currently serving as a coordinator for the Habitat Conservation Plan for Private Forest Support. So, definite nexus with this committee. My background is I've been doing wildlife and forestry work for pretty much my whole career, and been with Department of Forestry, I think, since 2003. And Gold Beach, Scott, is near and dear to my heart. I spent 2 summers there working for the Forest Service, and I love it down there. I miss it. Definitely a magical place. And then I also just learned that Chad might be my neighbor. I didn't know you moved to Dallas. So this is great. But yeah, I definitely am a small town person as well. My husband and I have a very small tree farm of about 12 acres, just south of Dallas, Monmouth area. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. And who else is on? Kate?
Kate Wells.
Kate, kick it to Kate.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, Scott. Nice to see you again. I'm Kate Wells, and Courtney, welcome to the team. We're so glad that you're here with us. I am the Willamette Branch Supervisor for the National Marine Fisheries Service. Our office is in the Lloyd District in Portland, right here. I'm here on one of my office days. I've been in the Oregon, Washington geography for about 9, going on 10 years now. I came out here from Florida, from our Southeast regional office, where I did fisheries management for 8 years there, and then some marine mammal management before that. So yeah, I'm happy to be part of this group, and I've learned a lot about HCPs over the past few years since we've had quite an onslaught of them coming through my office's geography. I've gotten the crash course that I didn't know that I needed, but that's been a lot of fun. And we've gotten to meet a lot of interesting people and learn all about the process, which has been really a terrific, terrific learning experience. And I just wanted to call your attention real quick. Sam Bankston, you'll often see him on many of the meetings. He is our full-time employee that is helping us with the private forest accords. He is a reimbursable employee, full-time status that we have here. This is all he does. So when I can't make it, he will go in my place. He's kind of the go-to person for the private forest accord for NIMS. So you'll see his name pop up, and he'll be on lots of meetings and things like that wherever, especially where I can't make it. So I just wanted to call that out, and he is here today as well. Thank you. And I think I saw that Chris Allen did not join today.
Correct.
That's good. But since you've introduced Sam, if you'd like to take a minute and just say hi to everyone, given that you're going to be participating, please.
Hi, folks. As Kate said, I'm with NOAA Fisheries. I work in the Willamette branch under her, and I was brought aboard about a year ago to focus solely on everything we're involved with related to the PFA. So it's been very much, as Kate said, a crash course, but learned a lot and continuing to learn every day a little more. And by way of background, I've been in Portland since 2019. Prior to that, I was in California, but since I've been up here, prior to that joining NIMS, I was in the environmental consulting world, focused on ESA compliance work. And then when I was in California, I was doing monitoring work for Southern California steelhead. So I fish very much on the brink. So it's been very refreshing to come to Oregon and be in a place where there are flowing rivers and fish in them. So excited to be part of this committee and continuing to learn from all of you and be part of the great work you're doing.
Thanks, Sam. And I'd just like to call out a special thank you to all of our ex officio members who've contributed a lot to this process and continue to share all of your knowledge. And I just want to really recognize our ex officio members. So with that, we all know that Kristen Rivard and Heath have stepped off the committee. Kristen Rivard was in the vice chair role when she did so, and that has left an open position for vice chair. Our next agenda item is to have a vice chair election. And so with that, I'll just describe what that looks like a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll move into electing a vice chair. So the vice chair role is to support the chair and administer meetings in the chair's absence, to coordinate with the chair after each meeting we have here. Then we have a chair's meeting with ODFW to recap the meeting, talk about what went well, things to follow up on, things to include in future meetings, and that's kind of the extent of the role. And we have historically, not by requirement, but just by happenstance, been alternating between kind of timber industry interests in one role and the environmental interests in the other role. That doesn't need to be that way. It's not, again, a requirement. It's just how things have worked so far. That's kind of the history and the description of the vice chair role. Are there any questions about what the role entails before we open it up into an election process? Great. So with that, I guess we can start elections, and I would just like to take a minute to put a name forward, and then if there's others, then we can go through a roll call vote with Andy. But I would like to put Mark Stern's name forward as a really, I think, well-qualified vice chair. And if there's any others, that'll be the time to speak up. All right, Andy, well, it sounds like we've got one name.
I would just
Can you-
add, I'd be honored to serve as the vice chair and really appreciate being nominated. And, we've had a few offline conversations with people. And so we'll look forward to taking that on and working with everybody in that role, including Chad. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we're not done with the process yet,
Yeah,
but I'll
okay.
save my comments for afterwards. So with that, we've got a nomination. Can I get a second? I think we need to.
I second the nomination.
Great. Andy, can you lead us through a roll call vote?
And you're just hoping for a presence, or are we actually voting yay, nay for the roll call?
A yay, nay to elect Mark Stern
Okay.
to vice chair.
Thank you. All right. Please respond in yay or nay after I call your name. Chad Washington,
Yay.
Scott Lightcap,
Yay.
Courtney Greasel,
Yay.
Brandon Caparata,
Yay.
Andrew Perky,
Yay.
Mark Stern.
Yay.
All right, it passes. Hand it back to you, Chad.
Great. And with that, Mark, thank you for your willingness to serve in that role and bringing all of your experience to that role. I think it's going to be really good. It's also really nice to see that unanimous vote again. It's usually how it works. Not always, but usually it's pretty unanimous.
Can we get an acceptance speech now, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, everybody. I guess the one other thing I would just share, and others know it, but maybe for Courtney and Scott, I serve on the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, and the composition of the Private Forest Accord Committee includes 3 people from the industry world and 3 people from the enviro conservation world and 1 seat from somebody on the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. And so that happens to be the seat I occupy, just for seeing how the structure all comes together there. But thanks everybody for your support, and look forward to working with everybody on this.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And with that, we've got our next agenda item, and we're lucky to be joined today by Tiffany Garcia from Oregon State University, and she'll be presenting on amphibians, what good amphibian projects look like, what we as a committee can consider when evaluating amphibian projects. And so with that, I will hand it over to Tiffany.
More welcome to share your screen, Tiffany, when you're ready. She might have stepped away for a minute.
I did notice on the agenda that we have her scheduled for 1, and she's on already.
Yeah, she was. I let her know that we tend to sometimes go a little
early.
fast here.
Okay.
I think she just stepped away at that perfect moment.
Let me call her.
All right, thanks. Try.
Andy, well, Fran is reaching out to Tiffany. Would you be able to give us an update on, we have an open solicitation at this point. Have we been getting any traffic? Are there any applications in draft form? Can you provide an update there?
Yeah, of course. Great timing. Thank you, Chad, for asking. So yes, we have an open solicitation accepting proposals. It began on September 11th, and it will close November 13th at midnight. So for those who are listening on the call, pfagrants.com is where you can go find resources and apply. It is an online application. I got that plug in. So we have 10 proposals in draft form, and we have 1 submission at this time. I am continuing outreach pretty rigorously. I am going to speak at a conference next week, spoke at a conference just the other week about it. So we continue to get upticks every few days in applications. We have had plenty of interest with pre-meeting or pre-application meetings, which has been going great. So we've been offering assistance as ODFNW for applicants to bounce ideas off of, have one-on-one meetings, talk about priorities, or even do some site visits if available or if asked. So yeah, I just expect that to kind of start ticking up more and more. I know there's a lot more in the hopper, and we still have quite some time here before stuff's due. But yeah, unless anyone has any questions with that, I am
Yeah,
hesitant
and
to
what
say
conferences, what
submitted.
conferences have you been attending and presenting at?
So we have last week we had an WFW conservation open house that we presented at. That's like I did about a 10-minute presentation there, an engagement opportunity. Next week I'll be presenting at the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts. I'll be giving a pretty good rundown of everything at that point. And then, yeah, in the near future, it's past solicitation, but there's some other ones on my radar in the future I go to, like American Fisheries Societies and other conferences alike. And I encourage anyone on the call, anyone from committee, or anyone listening, feel free to reach out to me if you have ideas, if you hear of conferences. Like, I don't mind hopping on last minute, jumping into a meeting. I presented to the tribal cluster a few weeks ago from ODF&W also. So feel free to recommend outreach to me and I will make sure it happens. Again, November 13th. So if we can get ahead of that, that'd be great. But I'm always available and I'm always happy to jump in. Courtney, did I see your hand up? Oh, it went down.
Yeah, but I can email you. But
sounds good.
Andy, can you also describe, did you complete that letter to the tribes? We had talked about intentional outreach to.
Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, so we've officially reached out through letterhead from the department to each of the 9 federally recognized tribes throughout the state of Oregon. Yeah, so we got those out probably we did an electronic delivery a few weeks ago, immediately followed by a hard letter delivery to all the chairmen or chair positions of the councils there, and it went really well.
Thank you, Andy. 2 more things. One is just for anyone that may be listening, federal recognition is not a requirement if you're a tribal entity looking to apply for these grants. Please do not see that recognition as any kind of barrier. 2, Andy, can you please introduce Tiffany Caldwell and all the support that she provides this committee? She's the one person that wasn't introduced, and I would hate to not have her efforts talked about. Please introduce.
Yeah, of course. So Tiffany Caldwell is my colleague here at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. She helps me with everything administrative. So from taking diligent meeting notes, following your guys' discussion, distributing meeting minutes, sending out public notice, posting on the state calendar, of course, recording meetings. She also helps on the back end of a grant, on the front and back end of grant administration. So she'll be helping with processing grant contracts and agreements. She'll help process payments and reimbursement requests, advance payments, and project closeout payments and reimbursement requests.
Great. Thank you. And also helps with our in-person meeting organization.
Mm-hmm.
So Tiffany, we did not forget about you. Thank you for all your help. And so with that, we will go to Tiffany Garcia to talk to us about amphibians. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hear you well, thank you.
I've honestly never been on a meeting with 2 Tiffany's before.
I know. I've actually typed one email to the other trying to reach out.
That is very unusual. Can I share my screen?
Of course. Please.
Yeah. Okay.
And Tiffany, if you haven't, you might want to introduce yourself too if you weren't planning on it.
I will. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Sure can.
Awesome.
Okay, so my title, Amphibians and Streams. Okay. All right. And I think I have a little more time, right? That's exciting. My name's Tiffany Garcia. Thanks so much for letting me talk to y'all today about my absolute favorite subject, which is amphibians and streams. I'm a professor in OSU's Department of Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Sciences. And I've been working in Oregon streams for probably 20 years. And I'm slightly obsessed with amphibians. So my work is usually freshwater focused. So I'm a freshwater ecologist. I like to look at community response to stress, and amphibians tend to be a focal group, taxonomic group in my work. My lab has, we have about 5 PhD students, a master's student, and a lot of undergrads who all look at aspects of freshwater ecology, amphibian biology across the Pacific. We mostly are in the Pacific Northwest. So y'all asked me to come talk to you just in general about amphibians and headwater streams. What they are, why they're important, what are their habitat needs, what are some of the things we can do to assist in the conservation and preservation of this important taxonomic group, and maybe some specific examples. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the next 20 minutes. If you have any questions, obviously we've got some time afterwards, but you're also very much welcome to email me with any questions that you have, or if you want to continue the conversation. So just in general, amphibian, sorry, did somebody say something? And you can you can just interrupt me at any time if you want. So amphibians, probably the coolest taxonomic group, in part because they're adorable, like this little toad here, but also because they're important environmental indicators. So it's a taxonomic group that absorbs their environment quite literally. So a lot of species of amphibian gets all their oxygen and water just through their skin, through dermal absorption. And so because of that, they are absorbing elements of water and soil quality, including contaminants, also things about the water itself in terms of availability, temperature. They're highly susceptible to desiccation, and you really find them in these moist environments. So they're a great indicator of water. Amphibians are in global peril, so biodiversity loss on a global scale. But we here in Oregon are very lucky in that we have this hotspot for amphibian biodiversity. The only other place in North America that's better than us is the Southeast. And besides football, I think that's really the only metric that you can use. The amphibians that we have in the Pacific Northwest, we have 52 species of amphibian up here, which is kind of shocking. There's quite a few that are just associated with headwater streams. But what's really great about ours is that they have these varied life histories. So we've got giants, Pacific giants that can grow to some of the biggest sizes that you see in the world. For a salamander, we've got ones that are super toxic that will kill you if you eat them. So wash your hands if you're going to eat a sandwich after you've handled a rough-skinned newt. We've got ones that actually are terrestrial completely and don't have aquatic life stages. They're still very much tied to moist environments, but they don't have their eggs in water, which is unusual. We've got ones that are completely just endemic to Oregon. So the Oregon slender salamander, you only find it in the Western Cascades. It's our little unicorn. We've got torrents, which are of conservation concern. I'm going to spend some time talking about them. We've got the rats of amphibian world, which is the Pacific Forest Fire. You find them everywhere. And then we've got species that are very much tied to riparian forests around headwater streams. So I'm also going to be talking about species like the redback salamander and the dun salamander. And then ones that are just super weird, right? So we've got tailed frogs, and tailed frogs they metamorphose. I'll talk about them too, but like, look at this picture. It's got a suction cup for a mouth. And so that makes it so that it can hang on to rocks in these really fast moving streams. And that makes them, they've got really strange adaptations that allow them to live in these headwater streams. And what I think is important about these amphibians is that we can look at distributions and their adaptations around the Pacific Northwest and get a real feel for how these landscapes have evolved, including the management that has happened in industrial forests. Right. So as the timber industry has changed over the last 100 years, so has the management of these streams. And the big things happened, when We had protection of water with the Clean Water Act and protection of species with ESA and the Forest Practices Act. So the 70s was big in terms of, changing the way these landscapes were managed to protect wildlife and ecosystem services. And more recently, these riparian protections have included things like buffers, riparian buffers. And what the PFA did that I'm just so thrilled about is extend those buffers up beyond the fish boundary. I kind of equate it to like in California, when people talk about California, they're like, oh yeah, the Bay Area, the San Francisco is Northern California. No, it's not. There's a whole nother half of state. And I come from Humboldt County, right? And so I take umbrage to that. And it's like the same thing with streams. Like the world thought that stream ended where fish ended. And that's just simply not true. In fact, we get most of our biodiversity and really interesting interactions happening above that fish barrier. So now we've got these new regulations that mandate riparian buffers up and restriction of equipment. And so all these things are happening. And I think it's going to be super important for the management of these streams. And we've been looking at this for a really long time. There's such great research that is available for headwater stream amphibians. We just got out of the field last month looking at the Coast Range. This is where our sites have been. So we looked at the watershed scale. We looked at this big lens of like across this big landscape, where do you find headwater amphibians? And what kind of habitats are most likely to predict occupancy. And that's just, and the scales of the research is so impressive. Like this is a really big landscape scale. Then you got the Trask study, just as an example of how you can also do experimental work on a landscape scale. The Trask was in the aughts and in the teens, and they did a whole experimental implementation of sub-basin wide forestry and riparian protections to look at the influence on headwater stream amphibians in part. And then we've got lots of examples of site-specific projects. And I think your group is much more geared towards looking at these site-specific restorations and management objectives. And so I want to kind of focus us onto three main species. These tend to be the ones that you find, they're stream obligates. You find them in these headwater streams, although there's a lot of niche differentiation. So, and some interesting life history differences. So the Pacific giant, in Oregon, we have the coastal and the copes. They metamorphose. So they've got an aquatic phase and a terrestrial phase. And what's weird about this species is that they can choose to either stay in the water and be a reproductively capable adult, but neotenic, so staying in the aquatic ecosystem, or they can metamorphose into a terrestrial adult and go up into the uplands. So they have this kind of strange dichotomy in how their adults perform. They are huge. They are by far the biggest amphibian that we have in the United States, actually in Canada, and they are a top predator. So they can compete with cutthroat trout. They can eat cutthroat trout, depending on size, right? They are gigantic, and they are so important for structuring communities in these headwater streams. They take years to metamorphose, so they move up and down with perenniality. So they stay in permanent streams and pools, and they are mobile, so they can do that. You can contrast that with our torrents. So torrent salamanders, there's 4 kinds of them in the Pacific Northwest, 3 in Oregon. So we've got Cascades, Columbia, and the Southern. They also metamorphose. So they have this aquatic life history stage with gills and everything. And you only find them in these headwater streams. They don't move down into the bigger reaches. They don't interact well with fish. They will get gobbled up by Pacific giants, at least the big ones in the pools. So they're really constricted to these headwater kind of really cold streams. The cool thing about them, though, is that they can dig down. So this is this species that can go down into the hyperrheic zone. So you can so there can be no a surface flow of water in these headwater streams, which often happens in the summer. But if you dig down, they will be under into these interstitial spaces and still maintaining that kind of cool, moist habitat so they can persist. These are the ones we're most worried about. And the reason is because of that tidal water and their inability to move downstream. So they both the Cascades and the Columbia species have been proposed for listing under ESA. And we're waiting to hear about what the decision on that is. And then the tailed frog, again, biphasic, but they take years to metamorphose, and their tadpoles grow, and where you find them in the headwater network is basically dependent on size. They are in riffles. They like to attach to rocks and large cobble, so they can't handle sedimentation. So they really have a very specific microhabitat that they choose, and they're very temperature intolerant. So as soon as temperatures start getting higher, that's when we start seeing fewer and local extinctions for tailed frogs. What I like about looking not just at a species, but at an assemblage is that you really see how they have partitioned their resource use and their habitat use across species. And so in headwater streams, you find the torrents up at the top. That's where they are. We also will find them in second and third order streams, but the massive, the big densities are up in these headwater streams. The tailed frogs, you also find them up there, but it's really kind of microhabitat dependent, and they can move up and down depending on size and the swiftness of the water. So that's why they got that suction cup, so they can handle these kind of fast flowing, cool streams. And the giants move seasonally. Right. So as things dry up in these headwater streams in the summer, they move down to these perennial pools, which is why, again, that diversity in microhabitat is so important. But these aren't the only players in the game. Right. We have lots of amphibians that occupy these headwater streams, and we've got ones that are not obligate to streams. Right. So we have these facultative stream species, including the dun salamander and the western redback salamander, and they really occupy those riparian zones. And so we'll talk about how important it is to connect the stream with the upslope riparian forest. Okay, if you'll notice, everything I just talked about for the last 5 minutes had to do with site condition and life history, right? So we talked about water availability and how the different species are dependent in different ways on the availability, both seasonally and within the site. Temperature, water temperature, and how important that is for some species over others, the substrate, how that's kind of key for all of them, and then that connection with upland habitat. And I think a lot of mitigation and restoration tends to look at site conditions, but that is not the only thing that's important. And I think having a broader, more holistic context in which to put the site is key. And the 4 things I'd like to focus on are habitat extent, right? So total area that's available, plus the site conditions. Of course, that's important. That's where most of the action happens. Connectivity across sites, right? That's absolutely essential. And then diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean genetic diversity, which has to do with connectivity. I mean habitat diversity, you know, the different kinds of microhabitats within these systems, and population and species diversity, right? So diversity in all of its forms is so important to consider. It's foundational for any kind of project that's trying to restore or improve habitat. Because the pressures and the top-down stressors on these things is insane, right? So we've got intensive forest management in the Pacific Northwest, which isn't going to change because we need that fiber. But how we can mitigate that, the impacts of that harvest on these headwater streams is so important. And the underlying climate influence, which is only just going to increase over time. And also that kind of connected, correlated impact of wildfire, which we're still trying to figure out how that influences these headwaters networks. So I'd like to keep this framework in mind as we move forward, and also in mind when we think about headwater streams and the restoration of them. So let's go into habitat extent. This is a figure that came out of one of D.D. Olson's papers, where they were looking at different climate modeling scenarios to see how headwaters were going to be looking in the near future. And across all scenarios, what we found was an increase in the amount of dry length. So that means that water is just not going to be as available. This means we're going to have less headwater stream area, and habitat loss is the leading cause for amphibian declines around the world. And this is going to be the pattern that we will see in Oregon forests. The influence of climate on the drying of these streams and the increased seasonality of these streams, which I think is an important distinction, it needs to be considered in concert with forest management. So we know that trees need water. They're straws for water, and stand age is really important in terms of water use. And finding some way of matching up, really high rotation cycle areas with increased buffer sizes around these riparian networks is going to be really important. So considering both these stressors of climate change and habitat and forest harvest over time. Site condition, we can really look at what's important by species. So there's been some amazing papers that have been coming out. There was that big push in the early aughts to try and understand headwater stream amphibians across the Pacific Northwest. Now there's another push, and I feel like the current work is really focusing on genetics, as well as dispersal, as well as climate refuges. So these newer papers are really great. The Thurman et al. One, I'm on that paper that just came out last month, where we really looked at habitat selection and availability for torrent salamanders. We looked at the Cascades and the Columbia. And one of the things that really popped out, and I think that this is true in Emil's work as well as Dee Dee's work, is all about water availability for torrents. And there's some species-specific differences in their ability to tolerate shifts in summer versus winter temperature and extremes. But in general, water availability and water temperature are key predictors for torrent presence. Substrates also very important. We see that occupation of the hyperrheic zone much more in the Cascades than we do in the coastals, in the Coast Range, and that's largely because of geology. So substrate type is going to be important for how capable they are of taking refuge down in subsurface flows. And for all of these species, you'll notice I put a big check mark on dispersal corridors, because amphibian populations need to move around. And some of them are more able to do that than others, but none of them can do it if there's not cover and corridors. And so these dispersal corridors are key for all 5 species I've focused on here. Tailed frogs, like we talked about, super temperature intolerant, and they like to hook onto big pieces of cobble. Pacific giants, substrate's less important, but you do tend to find them when there's big rocks around, and they metamorphose. So that tie to upland habitat is really important, making sure that those stream banks are in good shape. Redbacks and duns are our terrestrial salamanders, so it's really all about upland habitat and that riparian zone. So that's site condition. So now we're going to go into that third category of that more holistic framework, which is connectivity. And this is where a lot of stuff can happen on the ground, both at the site and the landscape. I want to talk about within and across watershed connectivity, because those are 2 very different things. But within a headwater network, but within a headwater or a watershed basin, there's lots of stuff that can occur on the ground. And what we're seeing now is connectivity is really enhanced when there's that upland habitat that is suitable for dispersal, right? So it's cool, there's a lot of down wood, it's cool, there's canopy cover, and that tends to be in the intensively managed landscapes, that tends to be riparian buffers. So that's that new, at least in the headwaters, that those new protections are really important for connectivity. It's not just around the stream though, it's also between those arms. And so finding ways of improving dispersal within those different arms of those headwater streams has been really important. This is a figure that was taken out of one of a U.S. Forest Service project that was done looking at long-term impacts of riparian buffers on amphibian population genetics. And there's some great stuff on how downed wood and live trees are really important for that connectivity. And then there's that between watersheds. So this is over the ridges. and finding ways for amphibians, or to at least encourage dispersal over the ridges of these watersheds, really takes a concentrated effort on corridor placement and having those trees there in order to encourage movement when conditions allow for a lot of different species is essential. Otherwise, they become restricted to within basin populations, and you get a lot of genetic depression when that happens. So keeping that that heterozygous and really healthy type of genomic structure, you need dispersal for every organism on the planet. And so with these stream obligates, it can be really challenging. So assistance.
On this slide here, the large down wood that's in the foreground of this photo, is that an area that you would expect to find some of these amphibian species in that cool, potentially moist kind of refuge in the middle of this harvest unit? And then when humidity recovers in the evening, they would continue on their journey. Is that large downwood in the foreground a place that you could find amphibians?
You can find some of them, but not the ones I'm talking about. So in that large downwood, you're going to find Oregon slender salamanders, you can find Ensatina, you're probably going to find some redbacks, but these stream obligates need canopy cover. They can't handle being dried out at all. So, but that stuff is great for terrestrial salamanders.
Gotcha.
Yeah, related, Tiffany. I just hadn't conceived of these migratory corridors and type of projects that we could consider and fund. How much of that has gone on, whether it be that example or to try to create some, sounds like living cover for movement? Is that happening? Is that a restoration technique and method?
Well, I know that the Forest Service has been pushing that for a long time. It's important, it's got to be place-based, right? Because if you get above timberline, you're not going to find many amphibians there anyway. Well, you do down the Sierras, but up here, generally, they're in the forested zones. But in the coast range, that's where it can really matter. And these corridors, these forested corridors over ridge lines can really help with these headwaters. And the headwaters reach up pretty high, right? So they're the highest elevation wetted width that we find in these mountains. And so actually that movement from headwater to headwater over a ridge might not actually be that far. It's just a matter of having the adequate habitat to encourage that movement.
Well, I guess a follow-up question for my timber industry colleagues, is there management practices that sort of keep those corridors intact? Is that a new method? This is new to me, so I'm curious more than anything.
I don't know. I mean, that's a policy thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Fran, do you know if there's like active corridor placement?
Yeah, I think that providing connectivity is for wildlife of every species is something that is strongly considered in forest management. I'll take off my small woodland owner hat and just put on my industry wildlife biologist hat. In the work that I do, I help manage a little over 1 million acres in Western Oregon and Washington now. And we have wildlife management plans on all of those acres, and connectivity and corridors, just like the ones that Tiffany is just describing, is something that we do a lot. So yeah, that is happening on the ground. And we look at, within watershed and across watershed management, and how do we do that in a way that provides for all the wildlife that live there.
The way that we can use genomics as a way of measuring that kind of cross ridge dispersal and connectivity is fascinating. I have a student, and this is a bit of a tangent. Okay, so I have a student, Chris Cousins, and he's been working on Cascade torrents using landscape genetics, and he's found a deep population climate refuges in these areas where you get a lot of dispersal across ridgelines, where there's isolation and there's no way for these torrents to move across ridgelines. Those are the populations that they're most at risk of blinking out. So we have real world data that supports the importance of these corridors. But it's not just connectivity, right? So we've got habitat area, we've got site condition, and then we've also got connectivity and also diversity. And I think diversity is something that we can do at the site to encourage lots of niche space for all these different species. It's important to recognize that they all occupy a little bit different of a microhabitat. And so when you plan for and restore for a diversity of conditions within a headwater network, you're going to be planning for multiple species kind of restoration, which I think is the goal for most restoration projects. So things like lots of different types of vegetation in these riparian buffers, lots of different side channel and pool and riffle stream habitats, lots of different substrate types, lots of different flow regimes. All of that will contribute to the persistence of headwater amphibians. You guys hear that?
Hey, yeah, I do hear that. And then I was just going to say on your last side, Tiffany, did you put a mosquito in there? Do I see a little mosquito?
Well, you know, macroinvertebrates are really important, and the ones that emerge from that, so those subsidies from the aquatic to the terrestrial, super important.
And I'm going to keep you for a second. You do have a question from Scott, but I just wanted to, this slide is really helpful, I think, for our group. And when we're evaluating, like in the, one of the main reasons we were really hopeful to have you come, and thank you for being here today to help us. Like, these are the kinds of things that we see in the projects that we're evaluating. And so it's really helpful to see the connection with this type of action to the amphibians that we're trying to help.
Tiffany, this is super interesting, and it makes me question my career as a fisheries biologist. I think I got it all wrong. I should have been in amphibians. But my question for you is that cross ridge migration. Do we have a feel for how far is too far? Like, if all things are equal, say you have a forested sand that connects from one head wall over the ridge to the other, how is there a distance limitation that they won't go if it's more than X amount of feet or meters?
Right. It's so species specific, Scott. I mean, the giants can really move. The escapists, the frogs, if temperature conditions are right, they can move. It's the torrents that really can't. So we have found torrents 4 kilometers away from a stream before, but they were still, it was a very wet night. It was pouring actually. And so they're so dependent on having that water that's readily available. But when those storms happen and they can move, they need to be in a situation where the corridor is present so that they can get over land. So Chris's stuff looking at the movement of cascade salamanders is, I think, going to be really important to answer your question. Is there a minimum distance? Is there going to be, is it habitat related? Are there differences across the range of this cascade salamander? Because they exist all the way up in Washington down into through Eugene. So the data is coming in, and I'm hopeful that we can answer that question probably within the next 2 years for that species anyway. Okay, so those are the 4 things, right? The pillars for headwater amphibian conservation to consider in any project. But maybe we need to get a little bit more specific, right? So what can we do that would actually meet some objectives for these species? And for Pacific giants, really the big thing is making sure that they have those perennial pools that are present. So how do we do that? We do that with in-stream structure. And in-stream structure can happen in a lot of different ways. It can be placed, but maybe the more efficient way is to change out those culverts, remove some of those roads, and allow that wood to go down into the streams and then move down the stream, right? So that type of, I've seen so many culverts that are so small that it won't even let a salamander move through, let alone big wood. So I really like those projects. I think those projects are really helpful for creating these pools and these side channel habitats, which hold water longer, and they allow these Pacific giants to really kind of be place-based. Torrent salamanders, if your objective is these consistent base flows in these headwater streams, well, there are also things you can do. So one of those things is thinking about hyporheic, right? That hyporheic flow, and there's some amazing work that's coming out of Catalina Seguara's shop in the College of Forestry, as well as Dana Warren's. And they really, and while they're more hydrology focused, we're trying to work with them to try and figure out how riparian buffers influence that. We know that bigger buffers can lead to cooler, more consistent base flows in these headwater streams. So those things are going to be really important for torrent conservation. And then making sure that those riparian buffers are complex enough, right? So they have the structure, the vertical heterogeneity. In some places, yeah, maybe some canopy gaps, maybe some tree diversification. So like all of these things with that riparian buffer, one buffer does not fit all, right? And so, and it's very case specific. And I could talk for days about buffers, and I think we should probably have that conversation, but this might not be the place for it. But just in general, buffers can be really important for torrents, as well as making sure that hyporheic flow can flow. And roads, if you listen to Jason Dunham, especially over at in USGS, roads are a really big influence on hyporheic flow. And so trying to minimize or removing roads that are unnecessary. I mean, there's so many legacy roads from a lot of those, the early timber production. Getting rid of those can be really important for maintaining that base flow, which is one of the major habitat indicators for Columbia and Cascades torrents for being around. And then we've got the tailed frogs, right? And if your objective, and obviously every project is gonna be different, but if your objective is to maintain tailed frog populations, then sedimentation control needs to be part of that. And I think wildfires are going to be a really big part of this. Ashley Coble from NCASI just presented some great work last week at a meeting talking about debris flows after fire. And you get really big pulses of sediment and turbidity in these streams after fire, which makes sense. And you get the same thing after harvest. So again, having some vegetation for stabilization of sediments, allowing for some flooding regimes to flush that stuff out, worrying about bank stabilization, so projects that are focused on, banks, stream banks, not just in stream or upstream, upslope, but the actual banks themselves. And then again, back to culverts, because that sedimentation control can really be mitigated by in-stream structure. So a lot of those are just like this is by no means an exhaustive list. It's just a couple examples of things that can be done at the site scale that might contribute to things like habitat extent, connectivity, and diversity in the conservation, using these amphibians as a metric for those different aspects of ecology. And here's just a couple examples of like what you can see. This is a beautiful culvert where you can see wood moving through as well as animals. On the right, look at all of that diversity in cobble size and substrate size. You can just imagine all the different amphibian species that would occupy that stretch. And then down on the bottom, you've got these pools. Those pools are going to hold water into the summer. And that's going to be really important for maintaining Pacific giants. So there's examples of this. And another thing that I wanted to just get on a soapbox about is project effectiveness evaluation. And I really feel strongly, and I think a lot of restoration biologists, of which I'm not one, but the ones I talk to feel strongly that, like, how do you know if something worked? And building into projects pre and post evaluation or some kind of project effectiveness evaluation is so important to learn, right? From the researcher in me, it's like, I just need the data on pre and post. I want to know what works, how well it works, and what it worked for. So having projects that have very strong objectives, that are data driven, having design and data sharing so that people can see the designs that worked for their specific objectives, and having like these reference sites. So I kind of want to focus on these two, right? So the consistent measures of response. With amphibians, We can measure something about them over the course of this project. And it's so important to have that pre-treatment data. But things like presence absence is important. You can just, and that's simple, right? That's just, you can use eDNA, you can use physical surveys, you can use a lot of things to just see what's there and when. The densities get a little bit more complicated, but it's possible with physical surveys, maybe with eDNA moving forward. But densities tell you a lot about the capacity of that population, which tells you a lot about adaptive capacity, which tells you a lot about resilience. You've got occupancy probability. Let's throw math at this. A lot of these things hide, right? And they might be there and you just don't know it. So we can use occupancy probabilities to say what we think the population actually looks like in terms of abundance. And there's development and growth. So there's so many cool life history metrics that we can work at, like timing of metamorphosis. And that feeds into movement and dispersal and genomics. And it is a great way of looking at that. We don't have to be on the ground anymore. We can take tail tips and tell you like exactly where these things came from. And then again, the soapbox of we need to comparison data. We need to know how it's changed over time, either pre and post. And the Bakke design is something we've used a lot in Oregon forests, these before after control impact designs. And then also just picking a reference site. So comparing your treatment with a reference or a control site can tell you how things are changing in terms of abundances and complexity. It's not just the frogs, right? It's not just the frogs and salamanders. It's also everything else. So taking a community perspective would be really key for these holistic projects, to look at macroinvertebrate emergence and to look at vertebrate use. I mean, really getting as much bang for your buck by collecting as much data as possible is, I think data will never not go unused. I'll always take it. We just finished a project where we did this. We did project evaluation on a fish ladder that went in that was supposed to work for amphibians. So we just took the data, right? So we had a reference site. And so we did this thing where we just went back every single month and we looked at seasonal use of fish and amphibians. And I was looking through your list of projects that have been funded thus far, and there's just so much focus on salmonids and just fish rearing habitat. And I think that's awesome. But moving beyond fish, and gosh, that should be a paper. Moving beyond fish, that's a great title. But just having something that's beyond fish and just looks farther upstream. And I think with the PFA, it's just these new protections of headwaters, just begging for all these projects that just go beyond that barrier and look for amphibian response. In this project, we looked at both. We looked at amphibians and we looked at fish. And I noticed some of your projects are doing that. But generally, you get fewer species that are capable of overlapping with fish. So in this case, we looked at Pacific giants because they are capable of overlapping with cutties. And so we looked at those densities over time, and then we had a reference site. So we paired. And those projects, I think, are really powerful. Always the context dependencies, right? I mean, there's some things that just on the ground mediations is just not going to get. And there's a great paper by A.J. Kroll. He published this in 2009 after working really hard trying to understand the role of buffers on amphibians, stream-associated amphibians. He has so much work going out into these headwaters looking for tailed frogs, torrents, and giants. And what are the riparian buffer widths and styles and extents and variability that explain the presence of amphibians. And what he concluded was that it depends. It depends on the history of the site. We've been heavily modifying and managing these forested landscapes in Oregon for over 100 years and longer, right? And so that history provides a really important context for just how much a buffer can do. Yes, it's been shown that Duns very much appreciates buffers that are greater than 15 meters on a site. And yes, we've seen lots of abiotic impacts of buffers on water temperature and water availability. Yes, but it must be within the context of the past management. And I've never seen better records than small woodlot owners and timber companies in knowing exactly what has happened on that land and when, which is so useful when you're doing stuff like this. Another one is timescales. This is a paper that came out of Ivan Arismendi's shop earlier this month. he's got a long-term data set looking at cutthroat and Pacific giants in the Cascades. He has over 20 years of data on size and densities in old growth stream reaches and secondary growth stream reaches. And he's found a really pronounced effect on body condition and size in cutthroat. And he's starting to see that in Pacific giants. But I was like, Yvonne, why is the effect so drastic and clear with cutthroat and it's not with giants, right? Because you really find them overlapping a lot in these systems. And I felt like an idiot because he looked at me and he's like, Tiff, Pacific giants live 25 years in these systems. Like a cutthroat's done in 5. Like, come on, of course you're not gonna, this 20-year data set doesn't even cover a single generation. So understanding the time scale that is needed in order to assess benefits is essential for this kind of stuff. And I would have looked at this data set and concluded very different things, even though I consider myself an amphibian biologist. So it's never too late to learn. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that everything's changed. We still have huge data gaps. I am impressed and proud of the amount of research that's come out on headwater stream amphibians in the Pacific Northwest. I think it is considerable, and we can say a lot, but things are changing so quickly with climate change and associated shifts in wildfire severity and intensities. And I think that the 2020 Labor Day fires have initiated a ton of work that's happening both upslope and within the riparian zones. And it's fascinating. It's coming out like crazy right now. But those data gaps are just going to keep shifting, right? This is a shifting baseline. So having that upkeep and being aware of the new stuff that's coming out is going to be really important for y'all when you're picking these projects. And with that, here's a really cute picture of a torrent.
Well, thank you for that, Tiffany. This is an excellent presentation.
Let me stop sharing so that you don't have to stare at a torrent anymore.
This seems
And we like
a
staring at
really
torrents.
good,
Torrents are pretty great.
that you should also consider sharing with the adaptive management program and the IRST. That is the PFA house research. So
If I heard you, Chad, did you say that I should consider sharing with the adaptive management program?
and the IRST, the independent research science team, because that's the side of the house that deals with research, amphibian research, or any research that's going to have policy implications belongs over there. And this seems like it would really be informative for that group.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but I am going out on a big field tour with the adaptive management group and the IRST group on the 29th. We're going to visit some sites that have this. And yeah, it's I think that cross-pollination between your groups is going to be really important.
Yep, there is some cross-pollination, but there's also some pretty clear silos, and this group does not fund research. This group funds habitat enhancement, and so that research component really will be well suited in that other side of the house. But some of the examples you gave around specific habitat requirements will be really helpful for us to evaluate the amphibian projects as they come in to determine, is this really going to benefit these amphibian species, or is this a fish project that someone checked the amphibian box as well? So thank you for the presentation. It looks like we've got some questions from the group. I'll start with Andrew, and then Fran's got her hand up as well.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Tiffany, thank you. That was great. As you pointed out, the proposals we received, the prior solicitation, were primarily about fish. What would be our expectation in terms of proposals that were geared to amphibians, and how might they differ from those? You know, as Chad just said, people were checking the amphibian box as sort of a, oh yeah, also this, but what would an amphibian forward project proposal look like?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be different parts of the stream, right? So amphibians are just going to be farther up in the network. Obviously, you get amphibians all the way down. Like we're definitely, you see a lot of amphibian biodiversity, but you see these species-specific habitat selection where the headwaters, you're not going to find fish there. So it'd be really interesting if you got a project that wasn't about fish. because it was just about, and I see Gwen Burr is on. She's done some amazing work on headwater amphibians and can probably speak to this as well. It's just, it depends on what you're asking. And I think that that fingerling, headwater, first, second, third order stream stuff is really not going to be about salmonids.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that the types of projects that you highlighted were similar to what we would see for fish. So it's really a function of where they are.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you've got your hand up.
Yep. And I'm not sure what happened to your sound, Chad, but we can barely hear you when you speak. So I'm not sure. Yeah. Who knows? You can put it in the chat and I can speak for you. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming in. And this, when we were going through the proposals in our last round, we had questions about this. And so having you come and help us be educated as we review these projects has been really helpful. We also, I think there were some conversations around that really showed that maybe folks didn't know that there was this huge body of research out there on amphibians. And so I think that's been really great for this group to know.
Actually, and we have somebody here. So Bruce Burry is here, and he created a lot of that knowledge.
Pause for a moment, Tiffany. Scott, can you mute your? Thank you. Just until you're speaking, there's a weird feedback.
There's something weird going on with the teams today. So I don't have a question, Tiffany. I just really wanted to thank you for being here. And I think that this group, we can go back and look at your presentation and use that. You had a slide in there in particular that had, projects and like what the components were that would be really helpful for amphibians. So I would encourage our group to use that slide. And then I really appreciated Andrew you picking that up, that like where in the system these projects occur has a lot to say about their effectiveness for amphibians. Not that we don't want to do fish projects too, but that's all I got.
Scott, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was getting feedback. But so Tiffany, in the fish world, something that really made a difference for us was the concept of habitat intrinsic potential. And similar to the amphibians, you mentioned different species of fish occupy different niches in a stream's habitat. And where that really popped was when we looked at all the different intrinsic potentials as a density in a watershed. And some watersheds just, the lights went off like, oh my gosh, this one is so important for coho and this one is a steelhead. Are we close enough to be able to do that with some of these amphibians? And if so, have you tried looking at it on a density basis to see if some watersheds pop more than others in terms of helping prioritize where to go with limited funds?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and that's one of the objectives of a big project that I'm on right now. And so I can just pontificate on that, but I think that upland management and basin-wide management is going to have a big influence on how those headwaters respond to any kind of in-stream or site-specific modification. And that upland forestry, the intensive forestry that's happening within the basin, it all goes downstream, right? Like it's all connected. And I think taking that broad brush view to any kind of site specific project will be important. There's also variability in across geographic range, right? So you're going to get different species depending on where you're working in Oregon. And quite frankly, I mean, the highest diversity of amphibians we have is down in the Siskiyous. So, but I imagine a lot of this stuff is going to happen in the really intensive forestry areas in the northern Coast Range and the Western Cascades. So it's geographic driven. It's probably management driven. Well, it is management driven, and it has to do with perenniality of those streams and seasonality of when and where the water is.
Yeah, I think I would guess the answer to this question, but I probably am wrong. What other land uses and what other human activities are impacting these habitats beyond timber management and these geographies?
Well, when you get to the high elevations, really, it's timber management. If you get down into the lower reaches, it's transportation. right? And where everything's located and how it's moving around. It's urbanization, it's water diversion, right? All of that is really important when it comes to amphibian conservation. And but in these reaches, and there's been a lot of great stuff done on those lower elevation questions, but in terms of headwater streams, it's forestry.
Yeah, it sort of reinforces lower down our focus or our openness to considering in-stream flow restoration projects, because it seems like water availability, particularly late in the year, was really important, or is very important.
Yeah.
Great. Is my mic working? At this point, I have no idea if you guys can hear me at all. Okay. Just want to clarify, we have funded some research in the past, but that was like the brook trout sterility thing with XY, some kind of thing with the brook trout, trying to have sterile brook trout so that they couldn't reproduce in the stream. But in the instance of amphibian research and some of the data gaps presented today, those are clearly IRST and adaptive management program stuff. So when I said we don't fund research, I just want to clarify we may again, it's just going to be dependent on what that research looks like and if there's any policy implications that could come from it. And then a reminder to this committee, the covered amphibians in the PFA were the Pacific giants. So that's the copes and the coastal, and the two torrents, the southern and Columbia. So those are the species that we're focused on supporting and uplifting with our grants. So those were covered in Tiffany's presentation, and that's helpful. Tiffany, are you going to be able to share this presentation with the rest of the committee? If you email it to Andy, can we distribute it as reference when we're evaluating projects?
Yeah, I'll turn it into a PDF so it's a little bit easier, and I'll give it to Andy.
Awesome. Yeah, some of those graphics I can see being really helpful as we're looking through the applications around habitat. So another question I've got, downwood usually comes in fish projects. Is there an opportunity there to also provide uplift for amphibians by not just putting down wood in stream, but is there benefit from down wood that's stream adjacent or acting as kind of connections between these fingered ranges?
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the terrestrial salamanders rely on downed wood as a really key habitat component. We've got a project on Oregon slender salamanders where you get a lot more salamanders when you have a lot of downed wood. And but it's also going to be true for other species that are moving around. So downed wood and stumps and across age classes and decay classes are really key for they're like the kitchens for amphibians. They produce all the bugs and things that amphibians like to eat. So it's very much tied to the amount of on the ground habitat structure. That's really key.
So if we're looking at projects and they include some stream adjacent downwood, that could be a benefit to those amphibians if they're listed on the proposal.
Yeah, at a minimum, you got to have something on the ground for these things, and at a maximum, you'd have some canopy cover. So I guess anything is better than nothing.
And Tiffany, another question I have for you is in culvert design. So when we see culvert replacements and fish barrier removals coming in, is there anything about culvert design that makes them more or less able to act as connections for amphibians? I'm thinking culvert substrate, arch pipes versus round pipes. Is there anything you can speak to amphibian habitat and culvert design?
Yeah, well, there has been some work comparing amphibian movement and across the designs, and that D design, where it's not a round culvert, but it goes down into the ground, and it's beautiful. It's just this beautiful allowing for natural stream substrate. And I can't imagine anything that would like those round ones, to be completely honest. I mean, just look, I mean, they're horrible. And the way that they fragment the stream, nothing can get in those things. Upstream movement's basically blocked for a lot of things that can't go around. Now, amphibians can go around, but the ones that are tied to water just have a tough time. And the larval amphibians can't go around. So having those kind of overhanging culverts is just one almost perfect way to fragment a stream. So having those D-shaped culverts that are bigger, that allow for wood movement, that allow for sedimentation, that allow for flushing, and allow for amphibian movement are by far the better option.
Great. That's really helpful. Those are a couple of specific examples that we can then take with us as we're evaluating projects. And if there's any potential applicants on the call, they understand some things that maybe they could consider. Another thing I wanted to address, around the sedimentation, the PFA did extend the buffer considerably on most streams, both in width and in extent. It does go up and capture some of those headwater areas that you were describing. It's so important. But I wanted to say there is likely a distinction, between sedimentation from wildfire and harvest got lumped in there as well. But a wildfire is agnostic to buffers and does not respect them at all, where a harvest is going to maintain those regulatory buffers. So likely a little less sedimentation than a wildfire event, just put that point.
Thanks for that, Chad.
Kind of following up on one of Chad's points about culvert designs, and I maybe in the 2 years that I've been retired, this is moved forward by leaps and bounds. But when I was working, the focus was clearly on fish, and it was clearly on designing culverts that passed fish. And kind of the summary was we had a really hard time retaining substrate and gradients. Once you get past 5%, it gets really difficult to retain substrate in a fixed pipe without an open bottom. And so I guess the question to you, Tiffany, is, are folks working on that issue with amphibians in mind, not so much fish, to get into those pipes that, those headwater streams are often very steep, and that's going to be the tough part, is retaining that sediment. So where are we at on that?
Yeah, you're right. Most of the work's been done much lower down, and most work has been done on the fish. So, and there are fewer roads up at the top of those ridges, and those roads tend to be, well, they're not newer, but the roads, they're very steep terrain. And so it is a lot harder to do the engineering at those types of gradients. We're finding in our this summer, working in the Coast Range, gradients of 10% where we found most of the torrents. And so having something in that kind of terrain would be really hard. So the engineering challenges are real, and I don't know if we've met them just yet. But having those open bottomed culvert designs seem like the most realistic way of going about it. Those round culverts, I don't know. I don't know what the ecological utility of it is. They're cheaper and easier to transport, and probably much easier to put in, but ecologically they don't serve much.
Yeah, I think on those fronts, once we start getting into this work, we'll have a bit of salesmanship to do, because they're hugely expensive, like 6 figures plus. And when people start realizing that fish, it's a very utilitarian thing, people have mentally come to accept that. I think we have work to do to get people to, kind of get to your point that it's all about the whole ecosystem and everything in it matters. And so but we haven't yet done that and spent, $400,000 on a culvert that's for amphibians. So it's a tough sell right now, I believe. And so there's some work to be done there.
I can imagine.
Great.
Yeah, they're doing one right here on Highway 30. There's a crossing going in just for red-legged frogs, like huge amounts of money being spent on it. It's just I thought I drive by it a lot, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't look right. Like, what's wrong with that culvert? but it's just for him. It's just for red-legged frogs. It's very cool. But also, and maybe you said this, Scott, and I might have missed it, but some of those round culverts are oversized, and not an engineer, wildlife biologist right here, but don't they bury them so you still get natural stuff in the bottom? Tiffany, could those be used by an amphibian if they're installed that way, or
As long
still
as the
no?
width is big enough. Yeah, I mean,
The width is big enough.
there's some good stuff in Montana looking at those kind of underpass tunnels, culverts, and wildlife usage. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I just saw talk about how it seems to be about line of sight. If salamanders can see light at the end of the tunnel, then more of them will use it. So
Yeah.
it's a length thing too.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that would work for me also, right? If I can't see the other end of a dark tunnel, I'm not going to go through it. So, yeah, thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments for the good of the order? All right. Well, Tiffany, thank you for spending the afternoon with us and helping us to understand what makes a quality amphibian project. It's been really helpful.
It was my pleasure.
All right. To our next agenda item, which is adjourning the meeting. I guess we will do the closing comments and the meeting wrap up. So we heard from Tiffany on amphibian projects, how better to evaluate them. Got a new vice chair. Again, thank you for your willingness to serve in that role, Mark. Really looking forward to working with you in that. And I think that's it for the day. Other than welcoming our 2 new committee members. You missed that.
Quick question, Andy. Any more certainty about our in-person meeting dates next year? Or is that still to be determined?
Good question. I am working on that. We have a few projects I'm identifying. So the date should be on your calendars already as a whole. I don't expect those dates to change unless we change our solicitation or our review process. I'll go over the review process next meeting. I hope to talk to both Chad and Mark about that to recap everything. But I am working on in person. Hopefully we can go somewhere. It's either going to be like, I'm just trying to identify what projects might be best to demonstrate and get you guys out in the field. That's a goal. Day 1 is an infield tour. Maybe day 2, we kind of get down to business or something like that of the mix. Worst case, we fall back on either Salem or another ODFW offices elsewhere in the state. So, I'm starting that kind of next few weeks here. Once that solicitation closes down, that's my next shift.
Yeah, just going back to Tiffany's presentation real quick. I didn't have any questions for her, partly because her passion and excitement was how do you, there's just no questions there. But it did flag for me in kind of wondering how this committee, in some of the review of the past projects, there was discussion about, we don't know enough about the impact of these projects on uplift to the amphibians. So let's remove that statement from the applicant's intended or stated outcome. And I guess I'm finding myself wondering how this committee, how do we end up wrestling with what we've learned, which is maybe there is more research out there, or there are resources. Do we actually take an applicant and direct them towards those resources to help them flesh out really confirming that there's uplift? Or I think I just am starting to wonder, how do we not have them remove the species from the stated outcome, but get them more in a direction maybe where they're setting more realistic expectations based on some of the factors? It's a process question. How do we use all of that good information?
That's a really good question. Probably warrants further discussion, like an actual agenda item at another meeting.
Or maybe even when they come in, if they state an impact, is that one reason where we start to section applicants out a little bit for categorically following up with them in different ways. Like these applicants are requesting more than 500,000. These are stating a significant impact on amphibians. Like, yeah. Okay, now I'll stop adding extra questions to my question.
No, that's really helpful, Courtney.
Well, one quick thought on that is, I think as they come in, Andy, if you're talking to people, is to direct them to Tiffany and other research, because I think a proponent could, if they think there's a benefit to Pacific giant salamanders, I think it'd be incumbent on them to say it's in the lower part of the watershed, we're creating pools, off-stream pools, and it's supported by this research, it's a benefit to Pacific salamanders, or it's in headwater streams for torrent salamanders. So I think it's a great question. I think it's, encouraging the applicant to provide that sort of support. And I think Tiffany kind of suggested that there are examples there that could be helpful to the applicant and to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mark, is your hand still up as responding to that, or did you have another comment as well?
I had another comment, but I think Fran was going to maybe chime in on this, so maybe I'll wait for that. My other
Yeah,
comment.
I was, if that's okay. I thought, yeah, really good point, Courtney, because like, how in the heck do we use it? I think for me, I agree with what Mark said for sure. And then also, like, if I'm reviewing a project and I see that they've checked that it benefits a torrent salamander, then I'm going to look to see where that project is to see if it could benefit torrents, or, if they say it's going to benefit, just to kind of gut check, does that make sense? That might be a teeny bit easier for me with the background that I have. And so I think if you don't have that background, that's just okay, but you could rely on are they doing downed wood? Are they, did they say something about connectivity? Did they say something about refugia? Like, those are things that benefit amphibians and would be good to note on a project application.
Absolutely. Do you have something on this, or should we go back to Mark, who still has his?
It was just on this to kind of just outline the press. So what I do tell applicants is it's their duty to demonstrate in their proposals how they're providing that conservation uplift. So I do direct them to resources. I do direct them into past meetings when we have these kind of presentations and discussions. This stuff's extremely helpful. You guys don't believe it? A lot of people watch your recordings and these discussions to gain that insight. Don't know if that's good or bad, but they do watch them. So we do give them that resource wall. And then, of course, when it does, and from what Fran said, she has a background in biology, but when you guys get the reviews, you have about 4 to 5 sets of eyes regionally, locally, or local, region, and statewide, that gives you expert insight on the benefit, ecological merit, and benefit of the species being proposed. So you should be giving a good amount of tools to help make that assessment. Just to paint that and remind everyone. Thank you.
Helpful. Mark, you
this is really a question for Mark Brembrenner there. And I'm just curious, Mark, sort of in your OWEB world and OWEB conversations, how much with applicants or watershed councils, the whole opportunity with the private forest accord comes up, or do you see, overlapping conversations or intersections, and just sort of what you're hearing from the field, so to speak, if anything,
Yeah,
on
sure.
PFA?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that. And I guess from the big picture part, Andy coordinates really well with me to make sure that we get out announcements on the PFA application process. So we actually send those out in our listservs. So all the folks that are signed up for our Gov delivery or our grantees or applicants, get those blasts. They probably get really tired of hearing from us, but I think we get good saturation on as far as that. Our last OWEB cycle, the spring cycle, we started to see PFA applications as match to applications that we're getting. We're in the process right now. Our current cycle's open and it ends in October, which is probably why you're not getting as much traffic yet, Andy, because folks are probably trying to finish up our applications as they before they do the last minute ditch effort in those 2 weeks to get the PFA applications in. And just in several of the applications I've been reviewing, I see PFA as matched. So I think there's really good cross pollination between the programs, and I think that'll just continue to grow as folks continue to take advantage of it. So, and I know in speaking with a few of my applicants, I know the last PFA cycle, with the success of some of the applicants, they actually didn't need to apply to us, which was, I think, great. I think it presents a really good option to folks, whether they can get one source or the other, where they can match them up and make things go farther. So far, I think it's going really well.
Hey, Mark, are the
Mhm.
examples of PFA match awards that were made last year, or they're saying, hey, we're going to pursue PFA in this next
No,
cycle?
they're
Let's
the
match.
last cycle,
Right on.
and we're seeing it in this cycle as well. So folks are,
Nice.
I think, definitely taking advantage of both funding sources and the real similar habitats that they try to improve. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Andy, I think we'll see this, particularly those of us who were involved in the review of the first slate. But it would be interesting just to sort of assess the difference in this next slate compared to that first slate, both in terms of overall magnitude of response and also are people getting a better understanding of what this program's about and kind of narrowing the focus of the proposals. But we can cross that bridge once we get the proposal slate in.
Just since Andy said that there are people that might watch these, one, apologies for that. And second, if you are watching, it might have sounded like the grants need to be on forest lands based on Tiffany's presentation, and where she had said they occur. That is not a requirement. These grants can happen anywhere that they provide uplift. They do not need to occur on private forests. So lower in the system, if there are fish passage issues, if you're a municipality, city, county, tribal organization, land trust, you are likely eligible. So please do not consider not being on private forests as a barrier to accessing the grant program. Just want to clarify that before we close out. Anything else for the good of the order? Great. Well, thank you all. Thanks for the new committee members for joining us today.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Everyone.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.